Folk Tales. The Cricket. Once upon a time, there lived a bootmaker and a shoemaker. They were both as poor as church mice. One day the bootmaker said to the shoemaker, "Let the devil go hungry now, my friend. If we can't make an honest living out of our trade, let's make money any other way we can." So they thought and they thought until they came up with an idea. The shoemaker would lead the judge's 6 chestnut horses into the forest, tie them to a tree, and the bootmaker would read from an old book, as if it were written there, where the judge could find his horses. But all for good money, of course. That is exactly what they did, just as they had agreed. A search for the horses was launched that stretched far across the land, but to no avail. Then the bookmaker went to see the judge and said to him, "How much will you pay me, your worship, if I find you a clue?" The judge promised to pay him 300 florins. So the bootmaker took up an old book and began to read it out loud. Up on the snow-covered hillside, in the middle of the thick forest, all the 6 horses stand tied to a beech tree. That's where they will be found. All the village folk quickly prepared and hurried to the forest, where they found the 6 horses tied to a beech tree. Then the judge happily paid the bootmaker the 300 florins. News of Mr. Cricket, for that was the bootmaker's name, spread far and wide across the land. The myth was that he had a magic book, and nothing in the world could happen that he could not solve with the help of that book. Eventually even the king got word of this and was delighted by the news, as the queen had just lost her favourite ring and had made herself ill with crying. So the king had his royal carriage harnessed with 6 golden horses and sent off to fetch the bookmaker. He even sent his royal guards with it so that Mr. Cricket would come to no harm on the way back. Mr. Cricket felt so nervous that he began to shiver and quiver like a willow leaf, as he was afraid his deceit would be uncovered. When they arrived at the palace, the king greeted him with great joy. The king immediately set about telling him what had happened. "I'll have you know, Mr. Cricket, that if you find the ring, I'll give you 6 carts full of gold." "I'll do my best, your majesty, although I doubt I shall find it." Then he asked the king to have him locked up in a room so that he could think for 3 days. And the king willingly complied. He led Mr. Cricket into the loveliest room and sent him so much to eat and to drink that the poor man was at a loss where to begin. The first day went by, but Mr. Cricket came up with nothing. The second day went by, and the third, and poor Mr. Cricket began to lose heart. So he thought to himself that he would count how many courses he was going to have for the last meal of his life. The first servant came in with the first course, and Mr. Cricket said out loud, "Here comes the first." The servant was so frightened by this that he almost dropped the plate. He rushed out to the kitchen and said to the cook and the undercook, "Oh dear, we're done for. That magician knows we stole the ring." Of course, this was true. Indeed, it had been the servant, the cook and the undercook who had stolen the Queen's ring. They agreed that the second course should be taken in by the cook. And as the cook entered the room, Mr. Cricket said, "Here comes the second." The cook slammed down the plate in great fright and fled to the kitchen. "Oh dear, we're done for. I'll see what he says to me," said the undercook, and entered with the third course in hand. Of course, the bootmaker said, "Here comes the third." The undercook was so scared that he fell to his knees in front of Mr. Cricket and admitted that the 3 of them had stolen the ring. Then the servant and the cook ran in, and they too fell to their knees, begging him not to tell on them and promised to pay him 300 florins each. Mr. Cricket thought to himself that it sounded good enough. Beside the 6 carts of gold, he had them then produce the ring, which he pushed into a piece of white bread and threw it out of the window just as the king's turkeys were passing by. One of the turkeys picked it up and swallowed it at once. Mr. Cricket was thrilled to inform the king, "Your Majesty, I know where the ring is. Have that turkey killed and you will find the ring in its belly." So the turkey was killed, its stomach opened, and lo and behold, the Queen's ring came forth. Then the ring was taken quickly to the Queen. In the twinkling of an eye, the Queen stopped her sobbing and was filled with the joy of the world. The king had 6 carts filled with gold. Then he had Mr. Cricket driven home in the royal carriage, and his steward and a regiment of soldiers escort him so that no harm could come to all the gold. As they were riding along, an idea crossed the steward's mind. He thought, "I'll play a trick on you, you bootmaker magician." So he got out of the coach, spotted a cricket on the ground, picked it up and held it tight in his hand. Then he asked Mr. Cricket, "Well, if you know so much, tell me what I'm holding in my hand." Mr. Cricket scratched his head and finally said, "Well, Cricket, you're in a tight corner now." "That's right," said the steward. "It is indeed a cricket. Your wisdom is endless. Now I know." Hungarian Folk Tales. Peter and Paul. Once upon a time, there was a poor man. He was as poor as a church mouse. Children, he had many though, but apart from them, he had nothing but a single cockerel. Next door to him there lived a rich man. He was so rich that he had absolutely no idea of all that he had. His yard was full of hens, cockerels and fine farm animals. It happened one day that poor man Peter's cockerel went over to rich man Paul's yard. The cockerel went over to the hens because he was so bored all alone in Peter's yard. The rich man, greedy Paul, saw this and he said to the poor man, "Listen here, Peter. Do something with this cockerel. Either kill it or sell it. But get it out of my yard, otherwise I'll batter it and it'll be of no use to you anymore. I don't want it to come over to my yard." Poor man Peter was desperate. What should he do? He thought hard. He'd kill it and cook it for his children, but his children had never eaten meat in their lives before, and they would get used to the taste of meat and want it at every meal. "Oh well," he thought, "I'll take it to my master and give it to him as a gift. Maybe he will give me something in return." So he did just this. And his master said to him, "Hey, Peter, you're a poor man with many children. Wouldn't you have been better off cooking this cockerel for your children at home?" "No, sir," said Peter, "because we're so many at home, there are so many children that one cockerel would never satisfy them all. They'd each just have one bite, and once they had tasted the meat, they'd realise it was better than boiled potatoes or simple soup, and they'd never want to eat those things anymore. They'd always want to eat meat." "All right, Peter. We'll roast this cockerel for dinner today, but I want you to be here to serve it to us." The master had 2 sons, 2 daughters and a wife, so they were 6. Peter went to their house at midday when dinner was going to be served. There was the roast cockerel on the table. Peter thought hard and began to carve. He reasoned thus: "The master and the lady of the house are the head of the family, so I'll cut the head and the neck off for them. I'll give the 2 wings to the 2 young ladies so they can fly off with more ease when it comes to marrying. The young masters will get the 2 feet so they can run better. And I, poor devil, will make do with what is left." This way he himself had the bulk of the cockerel. The master rewarded Peter for his wisdom. He gave him a horse, a cart, a plough, and everything to go with it, as well as some land to farm as his own. He told him to run his own farm and grow rich on it. Rich man Paul got word of this. He was ever so envious. If his neighbour had been given so many things for one single cockerel, how much would the master give him for 5 cockerels, he wondered. Rich man Paul finally made up his mind to take his 5 cockerels to the master. He was so envious. He gave them all as a gift. The master said to rich man Paul, "Listen here, Paul, we'll roast these 5 cockerels for dinner today. I want you to serve us at table. If you fail to divide the roast justly, I'll have you whipped 50 lashes. But if you manage to divide it well, I'll reward you richly." The 5 cockerels were roasted, and none was cut up. They were all in one piece. Rich man Paul went to the master's house, but he couldn't divide the meat justly in any way. Then the master said to his servant, "Go and fetch Peter." So Peter came. "Well, Peter, you'll have to divide these 5 cockerels among us." Peter thought hard. "Well," he said, "I've always believed in the Holy Trinity. This time I'll be guided by it too. I reckon the master and the lady of the house and a cockerel will make a trinity." "By the same token," he said, "the 2 young ladies and a cockerel will make a trinity. The 2 young masters and a cockerel also. So I, poor devil, and 2 cockerels will also make a trinity." This cheeky but shrewd way of dividing the roast made the master and his entire family laugh. The master richly rewarded Peter again and had the rich man Paul whipped as he had pledged. Paul was given 50 lashes and told never to return to the palace again. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Man and His Horse. Once upon a time, long ago and far away, there lived a poor man. Now he had 2 sons, and he had a grey horse. He was very poor and had to earn his bread by carting. Here and there he trudged with that grey horse of his, for that was the only way he could put food on the table. But the roads were so bad and very muddy. Now that grey horse had had enough of pulling the cart all by himself. Back he looked and said, "You're a good and kind owner, so will you buy a partner for me?" "You can speak?" "Of course I can, after all these years of learning how from you. So will you buy a partner for me?" "I would indeed, if only I had the money." "Do you know what? Let me loose and I'll get what we need." "How can I let you loose?" "If I do that, you'll never come back and you'll leave me here." "Die I won't for sure. You're my owner." So the man led him out of the stable, took the halter off him and let him go. The grey horse was very happy. Up went his tail, he whizzed around the yard once or twice, and off he went. The man was very worried. "That's a horse I'll never see back here again," he thought. Well, the grey horse headed off out of the village. Off he went up to the forest, and there he ate well from the greenest grass and came upon the sweet water of a bubbling spring. Then off he went to look around the forest. There he found the entrance to a fox's den. It looked good, so he snuggled himself into it, and there he fell asleep. Just then the vixen and her cubs woke up. It was coming time to go and find something to eat. So the vixen turned to her eldest cub and said, "Now, son, just go out and see what the weather's like outside." Off went the little fox, who got as far as the entrance to the den. He could see that everything had gone all white, so he quickly rushed back to tell the others. "Mother, we can't go out at all. There's been a big fall of snow and it's blocked the way." That got him a slap on the ear from his mother. "How can you say there's snow when we're right in the middle of summer?" "Out you go," she said to another of her cubs, "and see what the weather's like outside." The second cub turned back and said to his mother, "Mother, we can't go out at all. There's such a lot of snow." Thump, and he got one across his ear as well. The vixen sighed and she went up. She looked, and right enough, everything had gone all white. She sniffed the air, but it wasn't cold. She thought about it and dug out another entrance to the den. When she went out, what did she see, believe it or not, but a great big grey horse that had died and was lying at the entrance to the den. "It couldn't have come to a better place to die. We'll pull it in somehow, and that will see us through the long days of winter." Now, it was all very well for her to plan, but she couldn't even move the horse. Oh dear, what was there to do? She thought about it, and off she went to see the wolf. "Who's there?" "It's me, Brother Wolf." "What can I do for your sister fox?" "I bring you good news, brother. Just let me in." And the wolf let her in. "Right, there's a big grey horse that has come and died at my front door, and I can't drag him away. So I thought that you're a big and strong creature, and the two of us can surely drag him off somewhere and have his meat for the winter." The wolf licked his lips, and off he went with the vixen. Once they got there, around they sniffed. They pushed and they pulled, but it didn't work. "Sister Fox, you haven't got a good hold of it. Try to push." They tried and tried, but they couldn't manage. Then she spoke up. "Do you know what we can do? We can tie your tail to the horse's tail. You pull away and I'll push. That's the only way we'll manage it." "Fine, Sister Fox," said the wolf. So the wolf went around to the horse's tail, and the fox made a fine tight knot out of their two tails. Well, the wolf started pulling and pulled and pulled until it was out of breath. "Push now, sister, push. I'll pull and you can push." Now the horse felt the wolf pulling hard on his tail. He woke up and jumped to his feet. He shook himself, started to race off, and there was the wolf still tied to his tail and swinging from left to right as they went. And when the horse was sure the wolf was well and truly dizzy, off he galloped towards the village. Once he arrived home, he let out a loud neigh. Out rushed his owner. He's home, thank heavens, my fine grey horse." He quickly opened the gate to the yard. "Here you are, good master," said the horse. "I've brought you this wolf, so you can have his fine fur and sell it, and with that, you can buy another horse." And that's what happened. They took the wolfskin to the market, and with the price, they bought another horse, and went their way with two horses, just like any other men. And they all lived happily ever after. And that's the end of my tale of a poor man and of the tale of his faithful horse. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Golden Lamb. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man and his son. When the boy grew up, his father sent him away to work and earn some money. Off he went and searched for a place where he could work until he finally found a farmer who hired him as a shepherd for his sheep. The next day, his new master handed him a flute and sent him out with a flock to see if he knew what to do. Unlike the other lazy shepherds, the young lad never rested for a minute and herded the sheep and played the flute all day long. Among the sheep was a lamb with a golden fleece. Whenever the young lad played his flute, it began to dance. The boy grew to like the lamb so much, he decided to ask for the golden lamb instead of wages. As night fell, he took the flock home, The farmer stood waiting for him at the gate, and when he saw that none of his precious sheep had gone astray and all had eaten well, he was a happy man indeed. The boy and his master began to debate his wages. The lad said he would like the golden lamb. The master liked the little animal very much, but eventually agreed to let the boy have it because he was willing to work very hard. A whole year passed by. The boy worked well for his master and was given the lamb as his prize. He set off home, but it began to get dark just as he walked into a village. The shepherd boy eventually sought shelter with a farmer who had a daughter who fell so in love with the golden lamb that she decided to steal the animal for herself. It was nearly midnight by the time the girl got her hands on the lamb, but as soon as she touched it, her hands stuck to its golden fleece. The boy woke the next morning and saw the young girl with her hands stuck to the lamb. He did not want to leave the lamb behind, so off he set with the lamb and the girl with her hands stuck to its golden fleece. The three of them danced until they reached the third neighbour's house, where a woman poked her head out and saw the young girl dancing and prancing with the lamb. She rushed outside with her oven shovel and shouted, "Get back home with you and stop making such a scene." The woman smacked her with the shovel. "I said to do as you were told." But the girl carried on dancing, so the woman hit her with her shovel, but it stuck to her behind, with the woman on the other end. The lamb pulled them both through the village, all the way to the church. The lamb started to dance with a girl stuck to its fleece, who had the shovel stuck to her behind, and the woman on the end. The priest was just returning from the church and scolded them bitterly for making such a scene, but to no avail. The priest took his stick and struck the woman's behind with it, and was surprised to see that his stick stuck to the woman's fat bottom and he was glued to the other end. The boy continued to trail them through the village, where a soldier passed with his horse. He touched the priest and got stuck too. Then a weaver came out with a roll of linen. He smacked the horse's flank, and the linen stuck to it in an instant. Then a cobbler appeared with his hands full of boots. He hit the weaver and cried, "What are you staring at?" And he too now was stuck to the procession. The boy blew on his flute, and the lamb went on dancing with the girl stuck to its behind, the shovel stuck to her bottom, the woman to the handle of the shovel, the stick to her fat bottom, with the priest stuck to the other end, followed by the soldier leading the horse, with the linen stuck to its flank, the weaver stuck to the linen, with the boots on his back, and the cobbler at the very end. And the boy just went on marching with his peculiar parade until he reached a town where everyone was in mourning. The houses and palaces were all covered in black, and the men and women were walking about in black clothes. At the edge of the town, the boy began talking to an old woman and asked her what had happened. The old woman sadly told him that the daughter of the king was seriously ill, and no medicine was strong enough to cure her. The doctors all said that if someone could make her laugh, she would soon be cured, but no one had managed to do it yet. The king declared that anyone who could make his darling daughter laugh could marry her and receive half of his kingdom as a gift of thanks. Of course, there were many people who all wanted to try their luck, princes, counts, and acrobats, from all kinds of nations and nationalities, but no one succeeded. No matter how hard they tried, the princess never even smiled, and they all ended up with their heads impaled on a pole. The next morning, the boy announced that he intended to make the princess laugh. The king was happy to hear the news and asked his daughter to stand outside. The young shepherd began to play his flute. The golden lamb went on dancing with the girl stuck to its fleece, with the shovel on her behind, and the woman stuck to the shovel, the stick on her fat bottom, with the priest stuck to the other end, followed by the soldier with his horse, with the linen stuck to its flank, the weaver stuck to the linen, with boots on his back, and the cobbler at the end of the line. When the princess saw this, she burst out laughing, and that made the golden lamb so happy that it shook everything and everyone off and began to dance alone. And then the girl began to dance, and then the woman, and then the priest, and then the soldier with his horse, and then the weaver, and even the cobbler. The king happily gave his blessing for the shepherd boy to marry his daughter. He gave the weaver and the cobbler royal warrants. He made the soldier his general and the priest his royal cardinal. The woman was promoted to royal baker and the girl became the princess's maid. The wedding feast went on for a week and a day, and the whole kingdom celebrated the bride and groom. If the violin strings hadn't snapped, they would all still be dancing. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Round Stone. Once upon a time, there lived a poor man. He had many, many children. Off he would go to catch a fish for the table, for they were very poor and had to eat. His wife would cook these fish for all the children. That's what they had to live on. Now, not far away from there lived his brother and his family, and very rich he was too. But he never helped his brother out. When there wasn't a bite to eat in the poor man's house, he would send to his brother, in the name of God, to let him have enough flour to make supper for the children. But he never got any. Once, when there was hardly a scrap to eat for a whole week, the poor fisherman said to his wife he was off to fish and he wouldn't come back until his satchel was full. He sat down on the bank early in the morning. No matter where he cast his net, there was nothing in it when he drew it in, not even a fish as big as my little finger. Now dusk was on him and still no fish. The poor man grew very angry. Well then, he thought, that's it. I'll cast the net one more time and no matter what, I'll go home. When he pulled it out, well, it was as heavy as could be. Now then, said he to himself, there must be a huge fish in it. Indeed, he could hardly pull the net out of the water. Out it came, and what was in it but a great, big, round stone. Ah, well, said he, I'll take it home anyway. At least the children at home will be able to play with it. And home he took it. His children were still awake. They looked at the great big round stone and started to play with it. They couldn't go to bed. They were having such fun with the game. They rolled it up and rolled it down the room and screamed with delight because the stone was getting brighter and brighter. Look, wife dear, this is some kind of wonder of a stone. It's shining like a diamond. Dear heart, said she, it's a diamond for sure. So they quickly decided that she should go next day to show the stone to the king himself, to see if he wanted to buy it for a lot of money. Up she rose at the dawning of day, wrapped the stone in a kerchief, and set off to see the king. First she saluted the king in the proper way. She took out the stone and showed it to him. Now, where did you find that, my poor good woman? Said the king, and was astonished. She told him that her husband had found it in the water. Then, my poor good woman, let me have it, and I'll give you 1,000 florins for it. Because he knew that it was a real diamond. The poor woman did not say a word. She just gave a little cough. Well, if 1,000 isn't enough, I'll give you 2,000. And the poor woman coughed again, and was so confused that not a word could she speak. But the king thought she wanted more. Listen then, my poor good woman, would you think 3 sacks of gold would be enough for the stone? This time she didn't cough. She just nodded her head. Straight away the king filled 3 sacks with gold and even gave her a cart and a horse so that she could go home. Well, didn't she go home in great happiness? Or wasn't there great happiness at home too? Never again would they go hungry. Well then, dear wife, said the poor fisherman, we should weigh the gold to see how much we have. Right you are, said she. Now there wasn't a weight in the house. One of the boys went to see the rich uncle. What would you be wanting a weight for? Asked the rich relation mockingly. My father wants to weigh some money, said the boy. Well, the rich relative had a great laugh at this. Here you are, son. Here's the weight. And I'll come too, for this is something I have to see. Your father weighing money. So the rich relation stood, and all he could do was open his mouth and his eyes wide in amazement. Not even he had ever seen as much money all at once. Where did you get all that gold from? The fisherman thought to himself, I'll have a little joke here. The king gave it to me in return for 3 cats. How could that be? Asked the rich relation. Well, the fact is, brother, the king's palace is knee-deep in mice. So many that the king and the royal family cannot even eat their lunch or their supper. I heard of this, and while I was coming and going, I got 3 cats and brought them with me as a present for the king. It was as if I'd been given a reprieve, so delighted was the king, and he straight away gave me 3 sacks of gold for the 3 cats. The rich relation heard this and couldn't wait to get started. Well, up he went and called everywhere in the villages around them, and he bought every cat there was for a right handful of money. He packed them all into his cart and off he went to the king. What have you come here for? Asked the king. Your Majesty, I heard that you were in great need of cats, so that's what I've brought you. You mean in that sack there's nothing but cats? Let me see. The rich relation opened the sack. There were cats jumping all over the place. Cats to the right, cats to the left, cats everywhere. And you know what cats are like? They ripped and tore at everything. Dear heavens, what is going on here? Many cats, that's what. The king had him seized for playing such a trick on him. He threw him into prison, and for all I know, he's still in there, if he hasn't been set free, for catting the king.